The thing with the African cars that stems even from colonization, because say a very good example is like with France. France just took their soldiers off the ground in West Africa, but they still colonized 15 African countries because they bear the first right of refusal when you're doing business. You must deposit like a certain sizable amount of money in France and everything, like you're still using the franc when they're using the euro. So basically, it's by force because you cannot explain why France is a rich country, but they do not have any minerals or even grow their own food. But now, when it comes to the Bitcoin standard, the powers that be it the British or the States with their vast, like very powerful military, they are not actually in a position to control Bitcoin. So this is a very rare case of whereby there is a certain asset which is very valuable but cannot be controlled by the powers that be.
Hi, Master Guantai. How are you?
Hi, how are you? I'm fine, thank you.
Thanks for joining the show. Can you explain who's Master Guantai to our audience and what you do around Bitcoin?
Yeah, first and foremost, thank you very, very much. I'm very honored to be on your platform. I go by Master Guantai in the Bitcoin space, but my government names are Guantai Kabrima. I hail from born and bred in Nairobi, Kenya. As Master Guantai, I've been a full-time Bitcoin educator for 4 years now, and I also run a Bitcoin-only tours company, which is called Bitcoin Matatu Tours, for the tourists coming, especially from Europe and the States, to visit Africa. So you can pay for your stay, for your travel, for your visa, and have a curated experience to Bitcoin projects and circular economies to Bitcoin mining facilities here in Kenya and the rest of East Africa, and pay in Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is my bread and butter all day, every day. I do not have another 9 to 5. I'm a true Bitcoin maxi and Bitcoin only.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit how you discovered Bitcoin and all your Bitcoin story, basically, how it landed on your lap and you became such involved in it?
Yeah, my Bitcoin story basically stems from I've only had 2 jobs in my whole life. I've served the military here in Kenya, specifically the Kenya Defense Forces under the Kenya Navy. That was my first job. So when I served a couple of years, I got the conviction of I've done my time. I decided to be a career soldier. So I decided to venture in work that I could do my work and also travel and see the world. So in that regard, after coming out of the military, I started learning new skills, specifically in regards to money markets, which is forex trading. So as every forex trader can tell you, you think you've learned it all, but you quickly lose your money and you clean up your account. So I got washed up for like $1,000. But I was like, if someone in the world can do this professionally and earn a good living and get to be the person running their own time and their own destiny, I should learn more. So I took a year to study without actually trading actively. And as I was studying on primarily on YouTube and other resources, that's when I stumbled onto Bitcoin. So the thing immediately which struck me about Bitcoin is I came into Bitcoin from the point of anger. And when I say from the point of anger is during my studies before joining the military, I studied business education. And I quickly realized that there is a lot of information about money, especially like, let's say, the currency in Kenya is called the Kenya shilling. It is backed by the US dollar, but there is no in depth explanation to show how the dollar is basically printed, who runs the financial system, how bank works, and that kind of thing. So I started learning about, like, let's say, Bretton Woods and basically how the petrodollar runs and operates. And that is why, for me, Bitcoin automatically clicked,
When was
because
that?
that
Which
was
year?
approximately, let's say, 6 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the Bitcoin standard was already out there or not yet? I think 6 years ago was the initial appearance of the Bitcoin standard, right?
For myself, the primary resources I used to study about Bitcoin were uh, podcasts and YouTube. So at the
Okay.
time, the biggest name when it comes to podcast, educational podcasts, was Anthony Popliano Pomp. But we all know how that went. But I didn't go that route myself. But yeah, from learning from him, I got to stumble onto other podcasts, like especially like what Bitcoin did from Peter McCormack, which were very valuable learning experiences for me to learn about Bitcoin.
Okay. So you learned about it, and then?
When I learned about it, at that point in time when I was learning about it, I was not formally employed. So as I continue learning about it, I obviously was speaking to one or two of my friends about Bitcoin. But what I came to realize is when I say, let's say, the average person on the street in Kenya, some people cannot sit down and watch a poem or a Michael Saylor video and really grasp the concepts being put forth to them. And this is especially because of, let's say, the American podcasts give examples like citing the like Gary Gensler, the NSC, things like of that nature, which are examples which do not resonate with the a lot of Kenyans or African populace. So I decided for Bitcoin to be a real thing and for everyone to have a fair chance to adopt Bitcoin as their standard, they need to learn Bitcoin in languages they primarily understand and communicating on a daily basis. That's when I had the light bulb moment to start Bitcoin Tani, which is basically for me to learn about Bitcoin and then translate materials and videos of, let's say, like the Bitcoin white paper and different other Bitcoin concepts to Swahili and other native African languages.
So you did the translation.
For myself, when it comes to Swahili, I did the translations, but now I went ahead to network across Africa, like let's say for the Bitcoin white paper, to engage translators like from South Africa, from West Africa, from Central Africa to do the translations. Because in
Okay.
Africa, we have a lot of languages, so we had to work as a team across borders.
Okay, so educational material in the local language. What
Yes.
else? You mentioned the tours. What are these tours do?
Yeah, for me, I have done consistently like the Bitcoin, tiny Bitcoin education exclusively for now, going on to 5 years. But as I grew and networked in the Bitcoin community, a lot of uh, a lot of people in the Bitcoin community who wanted to travel and like come to Nairobi and are Bitcoiners for the first time like approached me. So we are talking about individuals. I even had a friend of mine like from Istanbul asked like a lovely couple like they are on their honeymoon but hadn't done their visa, like it was getting late. I organized their visa and they sent me Bitcoin for me to make the payment to organize tours for companies like, let's say, Bitnop to come into the country. So it clicked on me that I've been doing all of this, yes, out of the kindness of my heart, but 100% it can be a business. So when I talk about a matatu, matatu is basically a public service vehicle here in Kenya. Although ours are unique because they come from a colonial background where people used to pay 3 pennies to commute to the highlands and to town to work for the colonialists. But now, after independence, a lot of people got into the matatu business and started now modifying the vehicles to get more clients. So for me, it was merging a unique aspect of Kenyan culture, which is the matatu culture, with Bitcoin. So that is where Bitcoin matatu tours came from.
Okay, so basically, what you offer through Bitcoin Matatu is like tours for tourists or for people who are interested to understand what's happening in Kenya around the Bitcoin economy. Well, what does these tours go to like Bitcoin forex shops, Bitcoin mining operations, Bitcoin exchanges? Or can you list us like what would be a typical Bitcoin tour with your company?
The Bitcoin Matatu tours are very, very highly customized to suit any client or company. If I may give an example, let's say for yourself and your team, if you wanted to come to Kenya for a visit, first and foremost, we would have to organize visas for you and your team. Sometimes you can apply online from your end, but the process might be delayed to a point where like you can miss the flight. So we can actually organize your visas for you and you can pay in Bitcoin. The second thing is we take care of your accommodations. If you prefer an Airbnb or hotel, we can do that for you. And then when it comes to visiting the places to visit, the the place which is most popular is the griddless Bitcoin mining facility here in Kenya. The second one are obviously the merchants who accept Bitcoin. So from restaurants to different merchants, like even bookstores, you can get a very curated experience here in Kenya. So that the first thing is, you are dealing with a credible Bitcoiner in the space. You know that all your interests are being served as per what yourself want to see, because most of the times a lot of people, even in the business space, want to come and experience what Bitcoin has to offer here in Africa, and also have some leisure time. So that is what primarily we do.
Okay, and I have some questions regarding Kenya specifically, because when I look at Bitcoin in Africa, I hear a lot of headlines about the potential, about all the possibilities that Bitcoin offers. But at the same time, I see a lot of disparities between different African countries. Like the top country in terms of Bitcoin adoption, I would say it's Nigeria. And Kenya, I'm not sure where it ranks and why it ranks there. Where do you position Kenya in terms of Bitcoin adoption and ranking compared to other African states?
For me, I'll answer that question in two steps. When we look at Kenya, yes, first and foremost, we are very, very strategically placed geographically. So when it comes to the infrastructure, primarily electricity, internet, our roads, and that kind of thing, which any Bitcoin company would like to have, Kenya leads that in the whole of Africa. Because
Okay.
unfortunately, when you go to South Africa, there is load shedding. So we are talking about plus or minus like 4 to 5 hours without electricity per day. When we talk about West Africa, they have similar challenges when it comes to electricity, but also internet connection. So from a business standpoint, if you are a Bitcoin business like yourself, let's say, the place you want to establish your business in a place where you have reliable infrastructure to carry out your day-to-day activities. Secondly, when it comes to the 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 ranking of Kenya in regards to Bitcoin adoption, based on the sheer population of West Africa, and I would rank Kenya, let's say, as second in the whole of Africa. And the thing is, the disparities between our two, like in the continent, West Africa, South Africa, and East Africa and Central Africa, is Kenya is fortunate enough to enjoy very good infrastructure. Up to of late, there have been a lot of political instability right now. Whatever you are seeing in the news is just because the corruption has reached like a very, very high level, to the extent that there is budgeted corruption. So now the youth, myself as a millennial, and the Gen Zs are leading this struggle to make sure that that does not happen. So Bitcoin in Kenya is really getting there. And to give you like a very clear example, you can go to, there is a Twitter handle. They have a website and everything. It's called Africa Bitcoiners. They have every quarter, maps per quarter for Bitcoin projects in Africa. If you look at the Q3 map right now, and you look at the projects in Kenya, and actually go do the due diligence of if these projects are actually working or they're just on the map, you'll bear me witness that for the past, like let's say 3 years, Bitcoin projects in Africa, in Kenya, have been on the very up and very, very active compared to other African nations.
Okay. And you mentioned gridless in Kenya. What are they doing there?
Gridless in Kenya is focused on Bitcoin mining by utilizing stranded energy. So when you talk about that, like they have four different plants. One of them, which have taken people, there are several uses hydro. Basically, they go to a place, they find a location which has like a stranded energy because energy is being generated by a substation, like let's say in the highlands, but now the level of utilization is very low because of the lack of industries and the sheer population density of the area. So now the excess energy in that particular hydropower substation is now directed to now the Bitcoin mining activities. So basically, they come, put a container, set up the mining rigs, the ASICs, and then from there now it's totally automated. So based on the excess power, they run the Bitcoin mining facility. They also have facilities for solar and geothermal energy as well.
Okay, but are the conditions in Kenya, apart from the hydro dam, particularly interesting or challenging to mine Bitcoin? Because you have like it shouldn't be too hot, too cold, too moist, too dry, etc. Do you have any difficulties mining Bitcoin in Africa, in Kenya?
In Kenya, let's say, let me answer that question specifically in regards to hydro, because when it comes to solar, there are inconsistencies in regards to like the amount of sunlight you can generate sufficient electricity to mine Bitcoin with. But when it comes to geothermal and hydro, that is totally a non-issue. Because for hydro specifically, we're talking about the highlands. When I say about the highlands, we are talking about the slopes of Mount Kenya. So you are guaranteed year-long water supply to do your Bitcoin mining facilities. And this is very evident by even just this year, a couple of months ago, our president, Dr. William Ruto, actually signed a deal with a mining.
Marathon?
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically it's the first phase. It's $80 million deal. So you can bet that they sat down, did the due diligence properly enough to identify Kenya as the country they want to actually run the activities in.
And how was it perceived in Kenya, this announcement? Because usually Bitcoin miners have negative press around the world. How was the press release regarding Marathon and the Kenyan government's collaboration was perceived by the Kenyan people?
By the Kenyan population overall, it was perceived very, very positively because as Kenyans, we all want the very best for our country. So getting an American firm to really believe in the potential for Bitcoin mining in Kenya specifically and to actually put their money where their mouth is to the tune of $80 million, that was very positively received. And one of the best things about that bill being signed is when we come to the policies and actual laws going forward. This means that if the president and the whole government supports such a deal, going forward, the Bitcoin regulation in all aspects, be it the trading part of it, be it ETFs, be it any other investments, the government will be very positive and eager to listen and even learn from companies and different people in the space to formulate very positive policies going forward.
Okay, and when you look at Kenya in particular, how does because in Nigeria, for example, where the adoption rate is very high, the existing banking and payment services are almost are super inefficient. How is it in Kenya?
The banking system in Kenya, yes, it works. It works very, very well. Like if you want to
Okay.
send money from anywhere to anywhere in the world to Kenya or vice versa, it really works. The only downside is honestly experience in all other countries, even in Europe or the States, is just the headache of doing the whole KYC thing. Maybe you can have delays. Maybe they can freeze your funds if you do not like do the paperwork correctly. So in Kenya, it works. And then more so in Kenya, how really people transact business or even send or even store their money primarily is through M-Pesa, which is mobile banking. So a lot of people, when you come to Kenya, the thing which you'll quickly realize is everywhere you go, people are using mobile money, from transportation to
Hmm.
restaurants to even they have the mobile money is even structured whereby you can even save in mobile money. So a lot of people do not carry like excess cash. Like the normal person in Kenya will have like, let's say, 50 to $100 in cash, like on a maximum, because you can store
Hmm.
like 10x that on your mobile money, which is actually safer and people view it to be more convenient because yeah, it works. But what people do not like especially for the mobile money, which is the same with banks, is the high transaction costs
Hmm.
associated with mobile money and the banks.
Okay. Now looking at Bitcoin adoption in general in the US, in Europe, and Africa, and in Asia, how do you explain Bitcoin adoption in Africa, and what can it do in Africa that it cannot do in the US or in Europe?
Basically, Bitcoin adoption in Africa right now, everyone, step number one, can clearly see the problem statement. The problem statement being first, the high cost of transaction fees and the level of corruption to the extent that the government can freeze your money, or even from a political standpoint, like people can come to you through even the equivalent of the IRS is called the Kenya Revenue Authority, the KRA.
Mm.
So they can clearly come to your jugular for your jugular if you're using mobile money or the banks. So as we say, how Bitcoin fixes this is instant when it comes to instant settlement. Instant settlement through the Lightning Network opens a whole new opportunity for African youth. And this is because plus or minus 70% in every country, 70% of the demographic are the youth. We're talking about 18 to 35. They're the people
Mm.
who are talented, educated, they have different skills and competencies, but they are not actually represented in government. They are not helped to get jobs. They are the most unemployed, and they basically do not have opportunities here in Africa. So being on the Bitcoin standard for this demographic, which is the largest in Africa and which is actually the demographic which Africa will have like going forward, if you extrapolate in any other continent, Africa will have the youngest population in any given continent. Because like when you look at Europe, basically even the older generation, the older demographic is getting bigger than the younger demographic. So going forward, this really opens a new and brighter future in regards to, like, let's say, remote work. I can work for you, you can pay me in Bitcoin. I may be an artist or I may be providing this or the other service, and you can be paying me in Lightning.
Yeah, speaking of that, basically, I heard the same speech when internet was created or when internet arrived, that is going to be a huge opportunity for Africa. And now you can have your own shop, and Africans can go and develop businesses from Africa. But it didn't happen. Why do you think Bitcoin is going to happen in Africa?
When it came to the internet, yes, someone could have said that, but the truth of the matter is, step number one, the infrastructure for even having the internet itself in Africa was very, very lacking. Even the infrastructure when it comes to reliable electricity was very, very lacking. So right now, let's say 20 years ago, for me to have this video call, to say that I have reliable internet could be a very, very big feat. But right now, me being in Kenya and anyone being in any other continent, I enjoy the same 5G network, internet connectivity. We have in Kenya, you have access to any phone, any device, any computer, anything you'd want to actually purchase and utilize to run your Bitcoin transactions, or even to start your Bitcoin project. Like for Bitcoin Tani, we actually have right now. And we have the youth, as I mentioned before, they can clearly see they are not jobs in government or the private sector. So going forward, like all the youth right now, as we speak, they are very, very engaged to learn about different opportunities like Bitcoin and go above and beyond to become like developers, content creators, and like anything else. Let's say someone has studied marketing and they cannot find a 9 to 5 job in government or the private sector. Just learning about Bitcoin opens their opportunity to be a marketer in a Bitcoin only company. So right now, vis-a-vis when the internet started, yes, Bitcoin will truly work for Africans youth and in their best interest, and that is evident by the 60 plus projects which were not in existence like 4 years ago, but right now there are 60 Bitcoin projects, from exchanges to content creation to developers which are actually in the space. So when you extrapolate that, you can clearly see the trajectory is looking very, very positive in the African space.
But don't you think that Bitcoin could be the curse of Africa? Like the gold and silver and all the resources that was there, and we always speak about like Africa being one of the richest countries in the world, continent at least, and at the same time one of the poorest in the world. So don't you think that Bitcoin will just be another layer of exploitation and the money going to not Africans?
No, the thing with the African cars, that stems even from colonization, because when we, like, let's say a very good example is like with France. France France just took their soldiers off the ground in West Africa, but they still colonized 15 African countries because they bear the first right of refusal. When you're doing business, you must deposit like a certain sizable amount of money in your in France and everything. Like you're still using the franc when they're using the euro. So basically, it's by force, because you cannot explain why France is a rich country but they do not have any minerals or even grow their own food. But now, when it comes to the Bitcoin standard, the powers that be it the British or the America or the States with their vast, like very powerful military, do not actually have, they are not actually in a position to control Bitcoin. So this is a very rare case of whereby there is a certain asset which is very valuable but cannot be controlled by the powers that be. So you can be a billionaire and like Michael Saylor and buy millions of Bitcoin, and I can be in an African country and be just paid like, let's say, a certain amount in Bitcoin, but yeah, we can self custody and make sure no one steals
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, but that doesn't answer properly the question, in the sense that all these issues have been raised with the internet. So why wouldn't they become problematic with Bitcoin? And the way I see it is like regulation and government resistance and corruption that will lead to that, don't you think?
The template to answer that question very well, like Nigeria itself is the best example and the template that all the whole world and especially African countries saw, because they went out of their way to use the government to make Bitcoin illegal. But that only accelerated the number of people who chose to actively even engage, to even actually onboard to the Bitcoin standard.
Okay, so actually it does the other effect rather than the hoped effect. Okay, interesting. Anything else you would like to share with us about your activities or Bitcoin in general or Bitcoin in Africa?
Yes, for me, working in Bitcoin, like in the Bitcoin space for 4 years, going to 5 years now, like I really appreciate and like working in the Bitcoin space, and I've always been open-minded to working with different Bitcoiners and Bitcoin companies from across the world, just to make sure that this space really grows in a positive way to positively impact the whole world. So, like some good news I can share with you, just one day ago, the 31st of July 2024, I actually was a recipient of a grant from Bitcoin Beach from El Salvador. We have been
Oh,
doing
wow,
work.
congratulations.
Thank you very much. I was actually one of the two top grant recipients, so I'm very happy with that because we have been actively working in Kibra. Kibra is an informal settlement here in Nairobi. It's actually the second biggest slum in Africa. So we have been working to start a Bitcoin circular economy, and the main aim for this is to show the youth here in Africa, because vis-a-vis the West, here in Africa, a lot of youth are basically unemployed. So basically, they cannot stack sats by buying sats from the remuneration they receive from their fiat jobs. So the way forward for them is to incorporate Bitcoin as a payment method in their businesses. So now, onboarding youth, any business they do, any hustle they do, to teach them about Bitcoin, show them how to accept Bitcoin using different wallets, show them how to on and off ramp and even self custody, so that now they open their new horizons. Will be they have clients from across the world, not just in Kenya or Africa.
Okay, it was quite interesting discussion, Master Guantai, and thanks a lot for your insight. And good luck with educating and showing the world with what Bitcoin does. And we need more people like you to spread the word and educate people about Bitcoin's full potential. Thanks a lot for joining.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And yeah, anytime. I always say I'm your favorite Bitcoin Maxi from Nairobi, Kenya. With love from Kenya. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Bye bye.